All right, everybody. Well, welcome back to another edition of TriState Football's Monday Night Rewind show. It's a Tuesday edition this week, but myself, Jacob Berkemeier, we are back here tonight to talk about and break down some of the big games from the past weekend in tri-state area for the football season. Week is it was it week three already?
Yes, it was week three already. It's crazy.
Already flying by. Week three is in the books. We had some big wins, some surprising wins. I think we're gonna talk about here tonight. I think it's been an impressively fun season so far this year, and I think that we're gonna continue to have more exciting stuff to talk about. But Jacob was at the Blitz Five Game of the Week. Jacob, do you want
Yes,
to
I was.
roll right into that?
Yeah, I can. I'll get these highlights pulled up for it. So I was at Lebanon. West Claremont came to Lebanon, and it was very early homecoming game for Lebanon, which I found
That is
interesting.
early.
So they do apparently a big tent on their field, which is why
Um,
they do it so early because of the weather and everything. So
that's kind of neat. I didn't know that.
yeah. I was asking about it because I was I was definitely
Curious.
like this is early. So I think I got the highlights pulled up here. So yeah, Lebanon ends up getting a 49 to
BC
14
matchup north of
win.
town tonight. Lebanon and West
So
Claremont. West Claremont
definitely a
won
very
this
very
matchup
good
last year by
game.
10 points.
Jacob.
Early on tonight, Luke
Yeah, let me
Fowler
mute
and Nick
this real quick.
Lauder sending home a message.
Yeah, so it was a really good game. You see Nick Lauder there catching one of his touchdowns. See who this one was. Oh, yeah, that was a nice grab on the sideline. I mean, Luke Failer, the coach's kid. So Coach Failer has been coaching him for the
Hmm.
last 4 years, and Luke was sensational this night. He went 15 for 19, uh, 294 yards, and oh, we don't need Caleb Presley. Uh,
Caleb Presley's making a guest appearance tonight.
yeah. Um, Sunday conversation with Kevin O'Connell. Yeah, we don't need that. So, um, anyways, Luke Failer, great game. 294, five touchdowns, 15 for 19. Nick Lauder, the Louisville commit, he went five catches, 123 yards, and two touchdowns. And then they had a few other receivers step up, have combined for the other three touchdowns. And I know we were kind of talking pre-show. You did the write-up for this game, and I don't know if you want to point out the stat that you found about West Claremont.
Yeah, so I wrote the preview for this game, and I was looking for something to kind of give the article a little bit of like a hook, just a little bit to look forward to when you watch the contest. And one of the things I found out. Obviously, we all know West Claremont's offense kind of lives and breathes and runs through Landon Young. They're pretty talented running back. And I found out, Jacob, that in the games in which Landon Young had over 100 yards rushing, West Claremont was undefeated. And then the games in which Landon Young did not have 100 yards, they were defeated.
Yeah.
They were I can't remember exactly. I think it was 0-8 because this was going back to the beginning of last year when he kind of came up
Mm-hmm.
to varsity and started being the feature back for
Playing,
the
yeah.
Wolves. And I thought that was kind of eye opening. And then you and I talked about the stats, and you said that I think the streak. I think my stats invalid
It
now.
is. It is now. The trend is broken, as you were saying. He went 25 for 157 and two touchdowns, but I don't truthfully think that tells the whole story. So Lebanon just, I mean, they were just airing the ball out the entire first half, and I think it kind of got to the point where it was tough for West Claremont to keep up. And not saying they abandoned the run game, but it just got to, I mean, it was like 35 to nothing, I think, at the end of half. So he racked up a lot of yards kind of in the second half, but Lebanon really did a great job. Their front seven, they bottled him up that whole first half and allowed their offense to play aggressive, play freely, throw the ball down the field, and it ended up working out to their advantage. And you know, props to Lebanon. They've started this year off 3-0, and kind of talked about it in my post game interviews with Coach Failer. Um, you got best test you're going to see all season next week in Anderson. So definitely a really big week for them. Great test. I'm excited to see kind of what happens in that game because the way Lebanon was able to throw the ball makes me believe that they could, depending on what Anderson's defense does to them, but the way they looked last week, if they're able to play that way, they might be able to hang with Anderson a little bit. They're a good football team. So shout out to Lebanon getting a win on their homecoming week, and really good game from Failer and Louder. And Louder's kind of the heartbeat of that team. Good leader, big kid, like 6'5", runs well, good tight end. So they definitely have some talent over there.
I think Lebanon's in for a big year. Kind of reading up on them and getting the kind of the whole story behind that squad. When I wrote the article this week, I think that they are one of the better teams in the ECC this year. I think they're pretty loaded at every position. They've got a great senior class in there this year. Like you said, it starts out with at the quarterback position, and of course they're the Louisville commit. That definitely helps as well. We'll see how they hang up against Anderson. I think this is, at this point in the season, Anderson's biggest test so far. Now, of course, they do play Winton Woods and later in the season. But Lebanon, I think, will give them be a stiffer opponent for them. So it'll be interesting to see how that game goes. And then, kind of circling back really quickly to West Claremont, you mentioned, when Lebanon just started airing the ball out and kind of tacking on those big receiving yards and those touchdowns. That is the one thing as a defense you can't do, especially when you're so heavily relying on the running game, is get down 2-3 scores early, because then you're put in a position where you got to go, and you don't want to burn all that clock running the football. So you got to try to move the ball through your passing game. And that's not to say that they don't have a good receiving core and a good quarterback, but when you're so heavily reliant on the running back having a good game, that's a tough position to be in as a team. Being down.
Absolutely. You want to
multiple
play with
scores early.
If you're West Claremont.
Yep.
And one interesting note, too, before we switch over to you, Lebanon also is not in whatever region Cincinnati is for Division I.
Mm-hmm.
Is that Region 4, I believe?
I think that sounds right. I have to double check. But
they're in the Dayton region.
Mm-hmm.
So they wouldn't, they're Division I, but they wouldn't, come playoff time, wouldn't really have to touch a lot of these really good Cincinnati teams. Now you might have Dayton Wayne and some schools like that coming in the mix from Dayton, but you're staying away from a Moeller, a St. X, Elder, any of those types of schools, because they're in a different region for the playoffs. So interesting to think about and kind of look at as the season progresses.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. That's a great point, Jacob, and I think that'll be worth keeping an eye on. Even if they don't win the ECC title, they're definitely going to be, I think, in good shape come playoff time. And I'll kind of just segue it in a little bit. You had mentioned Dayton, so I'm going to head up kind of towards Dayton. I know Harrison's not in the Dayton Conference, but they did play Beaver Creek, who is in the Greater Western Ohio Conference, which is the Dayton teams. And we had a good game. It was Harrison and Beaver Creek, and it was a one-score game. Harrison got the win over Beaver Creek, 28-21. Let's just talk about it. Harrison's calling card so far this year has been all about that rushing game. I mean, they have multiple different players on that side that can run the ball effectively, and it starts with their starting quarterback, Brady Lawhen. I apologize if I'm getting that wrong.
Looks like the right pronunciation.
Yeah, apologize if I'm getting that wrong, but I think that's right. So their starting quarterback, passing only 3 of 6 in this game for 31 yards. He did throw for a touchdown, but that's just clear cut and obvious. We are going to pound the rock. We are going to absolutely wear you down on the defensive side on the offensive side of the ball in the trenches. And Lawhen has, whether it's from under center or from the gun, been really, really effective running the ball. I mean, this game against the Beavers, he went, 107 yards on 14 attempts. That's a clip of 7.6 average per attempt, and had 3 touchdowns, which, led the team in every statistical category. And then you kind of look at the Beaver Creek Beavers, kind of unknown to this area. They're primarily based out, play teams up there in Dayton, but obviously they'll come down a little bit. Harrison's not like it's in dead center Cincinnati, but
Yeah.
they'll come down and play some Cincinnati, based teams per se, and then they always give a big fight. I remember being in high school and always hearing about how if you wanted to play any of the teams from Dayton, the one team you didn't want to play is Beaver Creek because they were sneaky. They will play you tough. I think that's their brand of football. And you look at, kind of from their perspective, how the game went for them, kind of a similar, mantra for the Beavers, right? It's very much a run heavy offense, but Calvin's, I had it right earlier, and I'm going to get it wrong. Savoda uh, only had two completions in this game, but he had 71 yards. So you're looking at
Wow.
25 yards per attempt. So by no means did the passing game not work, but I think that could ties back into how good their rushing attack is as well. You look at their what they were able to do. Kellen Reeves, their sophomore running back. He's a two-way player. I think that's a name we're going to be hearing a lot in the upcoming years. Only 66 yards on 19 attempts, but you are absolutely you know I just lost everything I was about to say. Train of thought. Hold on a minute. Even at 66 yards on 19 attempts, that's obviously about 2.5, 3 yards per carry. But I mean, you're already setting yourselves up at least for the play action passing game.
Yeah.
If you are definitely just continuing to utilize the run game, and it works for I'm assuming that's play action, right? Defense is going to bite hard on the run. You've been showing run all night. You pull a little play action out of the bag, and it ends up with 71 yards and a touchdown. And kind of building off of that run game. It's not just their little sophomore who's had so far a pretty decent season. Trey Domingo, he's also technically, I mean, he's not an underclassman, but he's a senior. So there's another guy that they've got on the Beaver squad that I think we're going to be hearing a lot in the near future, and then you kind of look at the defensive side of things, right? Because it was only a 28-21 game.
Yeah.
There were two interceptions for the Harrison Wildcats, and I think that kind of is what put them in the position to win this game, right? You're talking about a one-score game, and unfortunately, for Brady Lawton, two interceptions, not the night you want, but or sorry, not Brady Lawton. I apologize. Both Calvin Savoda and Andrew LeBlanc actually threw a pass, and he threw one pass and it was an interception. So maybe take that play and maybe decide not against it. But I digress. I think what I'm trying to get with this is Harrison is a sneaky good team this year. I think within the tri-state, I know they often same thing I was talking about Beaver Creek sometimes comes down to play some Cincinnati teams. I know Harrison is often enough playing some Dayton squads because they're up that way. So we may not talk about them much on this show, and we may not go over their scores. But I mean they're sitting at 2-1 right now. I think that they've got a really solid and overly just balanced team. They've got a solid defense. They've got a good rushing attack. I think from the perspective of the passing game, I mean, even still, you only had 3 completions, but you still ended up with a touchdown. So there's some possibilities to open up the passing game there as well. But Harrison, the Wildcats, is a team I think we should be keeping out for this year. And that's my recap, Jacob.
Yeah.
Any comments you might have?
I just kind of wanted to speak on Harrison kind of getting their program turned around a little bit. 2022, they went 0-5 in the conference and were 1-9 overall. 2021, 4-6 overall, and then then 2023 they went 9-4, and then last year they went 10-3. I believe the team they lost to was LaSalle in the D2.
Sounds correct.
Regionals.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I can't remember. I think it was regional semis. And then this year, getting off to a 2-1 start, and their one loss was to East Central by 1 point, which East Central, we talked about that game a little bit last week. East Central is a really good team out in Indiana. So if you're a Harrison fan and, to the coaching staff and kind of everybody over there, they've done a great job of kind of getting the program turned back around and kind of being one of the teams to beat. And although it's a small conference with only Talawanda, Harrison, Mountain Healthy, and Northwest, even once you get to playoff time, it's like you don't want to overlook Harrison just because they're kind of on the edge of Cincinnati and bordering, Indiana. It's like, you want to make sure you're prepared for them because you play some smash mouth football and, they're going to play you tough. And they proved it the last couple of years that they can make some noise in the playoffs. And so just kind of wanted to point that out and say that they've done a good job getting the program turned around.
If anybody, first of all, Jacob's absolutely right. I think, Harrison is definitely not a school in the past you would think of when you go, oh, power football, good football team, right? And that's not a slight on any of the players in the past or the coaching staff, but it has been a nice turnaround for them for sure. And if anyone saw my face when Jacob said it, I had a brain fart. I knew Harrison is borders Indiana. I have no idea why I was like, oh, they're in Dayton. I don't know. So we'll digress. I apologize, Harrison fans, that you guys are in fact bordering Indiana. I knew that, but no one ever called me the sharpest tool in the shed. I digress. I think we've got one or two more games we're briefly going to touch on. So I'm going to let Jacob kind of take it back, and we're going to head back over to the GMC. Jacob, big win for Mason.
Yeah, huge win for Mason, and I guess it's a little bit on me. I didn't do my homework as well as I should have, but Princeton's D'Angelo Birch, he had been with Princeton for the last few years.
Yep.
He actually transferred to Mason this year, and man, did he make a difference in this game. And, we've talked about Ryder Hooks a little bit for Lakota East, but D'Angelo Birch had 26 rushing attempts, 224 yards, and 4 touchdowns. And then Brandon Birdsong, Mason's running back, he had, running back and corner. He had 20 carries for 73 yards and 1 touchdown. So you're talking about 46 attempts between those two guys, 53 as a team, 309 yards rushing as a team, and 5 total touchdowns. And, I mean, that's an insane performance on the ground. They really only had to throw the ball 12 times, and you're still putting up 40 points. It's impressive. And, Lakota East had such a great offensive day. I think it was literally one of the games where it's like if you can just get one stop, you're winning this ball game. So, we can look at some of the highlights here.
New number 1 team, St. X, on the road in Indy, knocking off Cathedral handily tonight.
Sorry for the technical difficulties. It's twice tonight we've had that happen, but we'll get better.
The values.
Okay. Anyways,
it did that to you earlier, and I got it to stop, and that time it wouldn't stop. So apparently, never a dull week here on this show. But anyways, keep going, Jacob.
So what I kind of wanted to bring up with, whoever got one stop in this game was going to win it because it was just back and forth the whole game, and now. I'm not sure if the K is silent in his name, but Niall Knutson or Knutston for Lakota East. He had an insane day. 27 completions, 29 passing attempts, 338 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. And D'Angelo Birch also threw an interception, but I'd be curious to kind of see. I wasn't at the game, so I don't know what time these interceptions happened, but it seemed like East did not have a bad offensive day at all. I mean, they had 150 rushing yards, 338 passing yards. Usually you have that much, and combined for 5 total touchdowns, you're going to win that game. But, Mason was able to get a safety early on in the first quarter and then a field goal. So those 2 scores pretty much won them the game, which is, props to Mason for getting a stop early on, and then basically from then on out, it was just touchdown, back and forth. So Mason now sits at, So they're 1-2. So that was big for them to get their first win, and tied with Lakota East 1-1 in the GMC. And as of right now, Middletown and Lakota West are the two teams in the GMC that are and Princeton. All three of those teams are 2-0. My apologies, but yeah, just wanted to touch on that game because it was a good one and an insane rushing day for both teams. So
Absolutely. I think for Mason, they've kind of been a little bit under the radar in the GMC for a while now. And you talk when you think GMC, you're talking about Lakota West, Princeton, and Mason used to be one of those schools you put in that upper echelon, when you talked about it, and this is a big win for them. I think this, obviously D'Angelo Birch is a big get, for the Comets to have him under center, but this is absolutely, putting the Comets on the right track for the rest of the season, and I'm interested to see where they go from there. So, apologies for the loudness of those clips, but I guess I'll quickly touch on one other game that I think is worth noting. Obviously, I'm pretty tied and tuned into the Kentucky football scene, and we had a big one on last Friday night. Cooper came into this game 0-2. Had a rough start to their season, losses at both Anderson and against Highlands. They're going on the road to Ryle, who, we on this show and I have pegged them as, hey man, if you want to get to, Lexington, Ryle's one of those teams you have to get through. And of course, we forget, Cooper went to the state finals last year. Cam O'Hara is still there at quarterback, right? The Jaguars are not, I think, any worse off than they were last year. Just a tough start to their season, had to open at Anderson. Highlands has got a good team this year. But going on the road at Ryle, getting the win, gets their season on track. I think this is, as big of a win as you can have if you're Cooper.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the biggest game they're going to play in, at least during the regular season schedule. When else do you get to, the top division matching up against one another?
Yeah, I mean, you look at it, from the perspective of this, okay, start 0-2, not the start of the season we want, but let's get back on track. I mean, it doesn't get any, better than a win over Ryle. And then I'll quickly just go through kind of how this game went. Obviously, the aforementioned Cam O'Hara, he's been at Cooper for quite a long time, holds, he is pretty high up there on the record books in the state of Kentucky. And he had another decent night Friday night, 16-25 for 134. No touchdown passes, but, still pretty solid in terms of completion percentage. And of course, went over 100 yards. Keegan Maher has been solid at the tailback position for the Jags for a while now. 78 rushing yards, 1 touchdown. And then here's where it gets interesting. Tyler Ebbs, 2 field goals, but one of the big things that pops up to me is the Cooper defense absolutely took care of business against the against the Raiders offense. Nathan Verax, Ryle's pretty senior quarterback. He's the leader of that offense. We obviously are going to get to Jacob Savage here in a second, but Verax is a very solid quarterback. He only had 5 completions for 40 yards. So shut down the passing game. Savage did go over 113 rushing yards, but he also ran the ball 17 times. He scored a touchdown. Verax had himself a rushing touchdown. But if you go into a game against Ryle, I think you absolutely have to be focused on stopping the run and playing good defense and took care of business. And I think, Cooper's going to start to gain that momentum back that they didn't have at the beginning of the season, and their squad absolutely you should keep an eye on in Kentucky this season. And then in terms of Ryle, maybe not the result you wanted, but they still are a very talented team. I think this should not derail their season at all.
Yeah. And I mean, Cooper is another game similar to Mason where, start off the year 0-2. So maybe, you get that feeling a little bit where you feel like your back's against the wall, and they answered the bell, answered the call, and, were able to come up with a win against a really good Ryle squad, same way Mason was able to come up with a win against a good Lakota East squad. So if you're both of those teams, you got to feel good moving on to week 4 and kind of getting into more conference play. I'm not sure if Kentucky really has conferences or if they just
they have regions. They have
so
regions,
they
so
just
they play the same.
regional schedule.
Yeah, regional schedule.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So, you're kind of, if you're in Kentucky, you're getting into that regional schedule. If you're in Ohio, you're getting into your conference schedule, and that's kind of ramping up. So, I think getting momentum before going into that's definitely an important thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, for both of those teams, that's a great point. I mean, both big wins to get their season heading in the right direction, and it's still early enough to where you can take those first 2 games, put them away, put them in the back of your mind. You're 1-0 this week, 2 big wins. Start trucking along the rest of the season.
Yeah. Well, I guess, do you want to move forward to the Blitz 5 top 25 for this week then?
Of course, we can talk about the Blitz 5.
It is week 4 this week, though.
Oh my gosh.
On the screen.
Gosh darn everybody, the producer that makes all these, he who shall not be named. I'm talking about myself, but my point, anyways, yeah, let's get into the Blitz 5 top 25. Why don't we?
Yeah, so we got it over here. Nothing really is changing too much in this top 5 here. Still have St. X, who got a win over Cathedral, which they are from Indianapolis, I'm pretty sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, St. X is looking great to start this year. Great defense, and I think their quarterback's going to continue to build momentum and kind of figuring things out as the season goes on. And then you have Moeller, who ends up sneaking out with a 24-21 win over Louisville Trinity. Do you have anything to add on that? I mean, that's close, back-to-back close games. You can kind of see.
Yeah, man. Moeller has not had an easy start to their season. It hasn't. I mean, they have they've had some tight games to start the year. Obviously, didn't come out on the winning side against Mount Carmel, right? That was who it was, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. From Illinois.
Yeah, team from Illinois, Mount Carmel. I believe that was the name of it.
Yeah.
I know it was Carmel. Maybe it wasn't Mount, but my point is, and tough start to their season, or a tough schedule to start their season. I don't know much about Christ Presbyterian Academy. Maybe that's a good game as well.
I just know they're driving to Tennessee.
Yeah, that's always a tough thing.
That travel, man. I mean, that's a long bus ride.
Yeah, it is. That's a long bus ride for sure. And I think the big thing for Moeller going into this weekend in Tennessee, take care of business, because week 5 looms large.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Number 1 and number 2, as long as they stay number 1 and number 2 going into next week. But that's if you're either one of those teams, really, I mean, that's what your whole season, kind of revolves around. You got to win, got to win that game. So
for sure. And then, kind of just moving on. Lakota West, since that week 1 game against St. X, they've really just gone right back to how they were. I mean, that St. X Lakota West game is always great at the beginning of the year, but they beat Hamilton 38-6. And says Tyson Davis set the school single game record with 180 receiving yards. It's kind of crazy, because 180 expected somebody to have at least a 200-yard day. But congrats to Tyson on the accomplishment, and they play Princeton, so mark your calendars for that one.
Big game coming up. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be a really good one. Some bragging rights in the GMC. For that, and we've talked about Anderson plenty over the last couple year or so, and it's just more of the same. Beat Little Miami 50-7, and this junior Mark Madden 379 all-purpose yards on 11 touches. So talk about efficiency right there. I mean, that's a pretty big yards per touch. So, and we talked about that earlier. Anderson, Lebanon should be a pretty good game. Good test for both teams. And you have the classic Elder versus LaSalle game next week or
Opener
this
of the
upcoming week.
GCL South.
Yeah, and GCL South opener, and they beat Springboro last week. So 3-0. Last year they didn't start off like that, but 3 out of the last 4 to start off 3-0. You got to feel good if you're an Elder Panther fan. And we already touched on Princeton, but they did beat Sycamore 47-0. And then Highlands beat Campbell County 55-13.
Bluebirds are good this year. Bluebirds
Yeah,
are. I
they
think.
look legit.
I think after Ryle fell to Cooper, I think Highlands is the team to beat right now in Kentucky for sure.
Yeah, and Kings also having a pretty good season in that ECC. They're 3-0, 2-0 right now in conference. Beat Loveland, and they're coming up against at West Claremont, and West Claremont needs a win after what happened to them last week. I'm sure they will come out motivated and searching for that first conference win. So definitely some good things going on in the ECC this week with those matchups. And talked about LaSalle with Elder, but LaSalle's also 3-0 to start the year after they got a 1-point win over Fairmont.
Kind of one of those things where it's like, hey, take a guess who the team with the only loss in the GCL South so far this year is, and it's Moeller. I think we said the same thing last year, right?
Yeah.
But it's never not like, man, that's kind of crazy to think.
Right.
Taft is.
You'll see too with the GCL South. It'll end up. You can't really tell with them until they play each other, because then it's you kind of get a better feel of how all those teams stack up against each other. And it's always so competitive in that conference. But yeah, shout out to Taft right here, coming in right behind Winton Woods, which Winton Woods beat Milford 38-17. Winton Woods always a good program, always can be a threat down the stretch come playoff time. But I mean, Taft has been killer this year.
Mm-hmm. They've been off to a great start.
Beat CJ 56-7, and I mean, this stat is honestly crazy. Through 3 games, they have 2 guys that have combined for 17 tackles for losses. Adam Kirtley and JoJo Pouncey. So, and they got Mount Healthy, who's another 0-3 team. So, I mean, if you're Taft, you're looking to start this year 4-0 and really have all that momentum going. You talked about Ryle, obviously, that they play Christian Academy Louisville this upcoming week. And then Covcath ends up snapping, getting on the win column, beating Simon Kenton 62-15, and Cash Harney having another good day, and move on to Cooper. So we got a lot of these Kentucky teams kind of bunched up right here. 3 Kentucky teams, 12 through 14. Mason and Lakota East back to back. I talked about that game briefly. Baden's a big one that I've talked about a little bit the last 2 this week and then last week. I mean, 3-0, and they haven't really been challenged too much yet. Beat Edgewood 32-18, so they have Columbus DeSales, so here's their challenge.
Yeah, I was about to say DeSales is always a good program, so that'll be a game to keep an eye on for sure.
But Baden's looking like the team to beat in the GCL Co-Ed this year. And then, yeah, I mean, kind of crazy. Middletown is, only 18 on our list, especially with only allowing 10.3 points per game. Defense seems like it's been really, really good this year. And they do play the Reeling Coleraine next week. So, Middletown's looking to start their year off 4-0, 3-0 in the GMC. So, Middletown's having a couple back-to-back years where they've been in the mix for that GMC title, which is where you want to be going into week 4, week 5. And Withrow, Lebanon, so talked about Lebanon a little bit, but Withrow's also 3-0 and outscored their opponents 113-7. So Withrow's having a good start to the year.
Yeah, for sure.
And then, East Central, they lost to Lawrence North, but like we've talked about with East Central, I mean, year in, year out, they're a good program over in Indiana. So I'm sure they will bounce back next week, even though they're playing a good Franklin County team that's 3-0. And then kind of just rounding it out, we had Hamilton which I talked about briefly, with the Lakota West game. And then we had Harrison, which you talked about with Beaver Creek.
Mm-hmm.
I talked about West Claremont a little bit. And then, Beechwood, which Beechwood's one of those smaller Kentucky schools, but every year, I mean,
So
they
good.
run that division that they're in down there.
Mm-hmm.
I always forget which one it is, but I know it's a smaller division, but
Mm-hmm.
they are a really good team. And, yeah, I mean, I think I watched them last year one time, and Fryman has been playing since a freshman. And
he's making
really
a case for Mr. Kentucky football right now. He is having that good of a year.
He's a really good player, and I know
Yep.
he's a good baseball player too. And then Nathan Paff's also really good as well. So, I mean, Beechwood, they can compete with some of these bigger schools in Kentucky, and in their conference or in their division, they are really, really good.
Yes, they are.
Then just got some teams knocking on the door here: Batavia, Clinton Massey, Indian Hill, McNick, Talawanda, and Wyoming. So
keep an eye on. Sorry.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Keep an eye on that Indian Hill team. They've had a great start to their year. Took care of business pretty easily against New Richmond, and they play Wyoming this week, which is a big game. So I will be there. So keep an eye out for that, all that on Twitter. But it'll be a big game.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I think, with those kind of honorable mention teams, it's just so hard to kind of break into this top 25 when you factor in the whole tri-state, because there is so many good teams that are around.
Yep.
I mean, it's like Beechwood's 25, but it's like,
Yeah.
Beechwood every year is, in the mix for a state championship. So
For sure.
I think it just kind of speaks to the level of talent that we are able to watch play, in this tri-state area, and just kind of how good the high school football scene is around here,
It's always good, man. It's always a great games, great atmospheres, and we're off to another great start this year. I think, moving forward, we're going to do our best to try to talk about every school we possibly can. Gave Harrison some love here tonight. A little bit of love towards Beaver Creek, but we're gonna continue to do our best, aren't we, to cover every team we can, because there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them.
Yeah. No, it's tough, and trying to be respectful of your guys' time as well. We don't want to be sitting up here for an hour and a half talking about every single team.
Thankfully,
kind of being as long-winded as we were last year, which I think we've shortened it from like 50 to 40, and we're still shooting for 30. But
we're getting there. We're getting there. We're getting there. All right. Was there anything else you have to add, Jacob? Are you covering any games this week?
I will be at Elder at LaSalle. So
It'll be a good game.
Yeah, I get the GCL opener, so I'm excited.
There you
for
go.
that one.
So keep an eye out on TriState Football's Twitter for both myself covering the Indian Hill Wyoming game, and then Jacob covering the Elder LaSalle game as well. There should be some great content on there. I'll just swing right into it. Obviously, we appreciate everybody listening or watching, however you consume this podcast every week. But if you do want to catch it after it is not live, you can check it out on all podcast platforms. That's on your phone, on YouTube, and then you can catch all of our content from TriState Football on that beautiful new website at www.tristatefootball.com, and then, of course, X, Facebook, Instagram, and much more. All right, I think that about wraps it up for us here this week. Thanks, everybody, for watching and listening. We will see you again. We're back to Monday next week. This was the one. I think we have one Tuesday show a season. I think we're at right now. So just another Tuesday edition of the Monday night rewind show. But we'll be back to Monday night. So thanks, everybody. Look forward to talking to you and talking some football next week.
Absolutely.